Welcome to White Pill Radio, the roughly every other episode version of Theology on Air, which is an outgrowth of Theology by the Pint, which is a ministry here in Houston where we gather around craft beer and talk about ethical, theological, political, social topics. And if you've never come to an event, you should. TheologyByThePint.com is where you can learn about our next events. We just had one on evolution. We're going to have one on worship coming up. So theologybythepint.org.
You can go to both, but I prefer org.
Yes, because we're a non-profit organization.
Yes.
Which reminds me that if people want to give money to Theology by the Pint, they can, and they can deduct it from their taxes.
Yep.
Although I know...
And feel good in your heart, you know?
More importantly.
That's a great way to slide it in there.
The Trump taxes are so amazing, you don't actually need deductions.
Okay, anyway. We're just already... Golly, dude.
Anyway, as I was saying, Theology, what was this called?
Theology by the Pint.
I know, but...
This is Theology on Air.
White Pill Radio.
Okay.
Is post-apologetic, ultimately hopeful Christian commentary on news and current events. And I like to say that it's blessed talk, but not happy talk. So we got a lot to talk about today. We're going to have to go fast.
Yeah.
So let's introduce the panel. I'm Evan McClanahan. I'm the pastor at First Lutheran here in Houston. And the Grand Poobah herself.
Hey guys, Sarah Stone. I'm the executive director for Theology by the Pint.
Hi, I'm Josh Crawford. I am a United. I still refer to myself as a United Methodist minister, although I'm currently serving as a bartender.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's its own ministry.
Honestly, I do more evangelism as a bartender than I ever did as a pastor.
Yeah.
I don't know what that says about me, but
yeah, I excuse me. I have my background in therapy. That's what I was doing for a while. My job was I was a counselor, and there's so much more counseling that happens in bars, in the chair, at getting your hair done, on couches. Yeah, so I get it.
I mean, basically, why would anyone ever be a pastor? I mean, just it's like just go.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, isn't this whole thing about bringing theology and alcohol together? So I feel like I'm kind of like emblematic of exactly.
Cool. Okay, well, start us off. I was going to say this is an earlier than usual release because you're from Dallas.
Yes.
So you happen to be in town.
Yes.
So we said, all right, well, while you're in town, you're on our White Pill Radio thread. That's why people might get a podcast on like Monday or Tuesday this week, and they might be like, what have I done to be blessed by this early release of this podcast? And you didn't do anything.
Welcome.
By grace, Josh.
By grace, and not from your own works, and no one may boast.
But on Friday, when you're jonesing for a release, you're not going to have one. So just remember that you have to listen to this one
But you can always go back and listen to one of the classics.
Pace yourself.
Pace yourself. The one article a day.
Listen to this one in chunks, I guess.
So stupid.
All right, well, get us started.
All right, cool. So first article that we're talking about today is this one by, I believe, The Guardian. It is titled, "What is Birthright Citizenship? Why is it being disputed at the Supreme Court?" And so just to kind of give an overview, I believe on Trump's first day in office, when he was just like blitzing through all those executive orders, one of them was to do away with birthright citizenship. I believe, because I want to be as like fair as possible, I believe it was like narrowly about children of undocumented migrants.
Yeah.
But this was almost immediately shot down by some of the courts who framed it, as the article says, blatantly unconstitutional. Now there is I believe 23 states have come together to collectively sue in order to have the courts oppose and strike down this executive order on the grounds that it is not constitutional. And there's also some issues about like judges using national injunctions, right? And like whether or not like that's a good thing, is that checks and balances, right? I tend to think it is. So yeah, that's
so now
it's
at the Supreme Court.
It is currently being heard by the Supreme Court.
There was a hearing last week, and it did kind of devolve into the injunction conversation.
Yeah, and that's like, I'd like to use this as an opportunity to talk more broadly about birthright citizenship, but like this specific Supreme Court case is about, it's not even ruling on birthright citizenship. It's just whether judges can use these kind of national injunction powers, which I tend to think yes. I think it is it's a pretty important part of our checks and balances system. I tend to, and I'm saying this as somebody who I've got skin in the game. Biden's plan to forgive $10,000 worth of student debt was shot down on a national injunction. So listen, I'm saying this as somebody who has been hurt by the use of national injunctions. But I think there's maybe some conversation to be had about how broadly they have been applied. I think in this case, when we are addressing something that goes all the way to the Constitution
amendments,
and not even in not even in kind of an indirect way. This hits square in the middle of of the 14th Amendment, and is going to affect millions of people within the country. I think on those grounds, a national injunction probably is warranted in this case.
Let's say something about the 14th Amendment piece of it. So my understanding is that the original rule, the birthright citizenship deal, was in the 1800s. It was basically that you couldn't have a baby here and then call that baby an American citizen.
Right.
Then the 14th Amendment ratified that and said, no, because then you have basically former slaves, freed slaves that are now having babies here, and we want them to be American citizens. And so it was the whole reason this is in the 14th Amendment is to help people that were formerly slaves be able to have babies and those children be American citizens.
No, I think there's more context, right? So birthright citizenship was kind of this implied right of that goes all the way back to English common law, right?
Mm-hmm.
In English common law, you are a citizen of the area in which you are born, under whose jurisdiction you are.
Yeah, the Latin word
right?
actually means to the dirt. Or
exactly, right. And so obviously because America was a British colony, we inherited a lot of that kind of common law senses, kind of very deeply ingrained in our nation's DNA. So this was just kind of the assumption, right? And then the Dred Scott decision happened, and the court ruled that no, not only are you not a free person now that you have entered a free state, on top of that, you're not even a citizen of this country. And that's when all of a sudden what was kind of this commonly assumed thing, all of a sudden it's oh, we don't actually have a law that's saying that this is true. And so that's why after the Civil War you get the 14th Amendment. At the time, so the onerous for it was absolutely freed slaves, granting them citizenship, but later Supreme Court rulings on it, when we actually have records of when Congress people were discussing this amendment in Congress, one of them brought up the issue of okay, but then Chinese people are going to be considered citizens if they're born here, and everybody was oh, yeah, no. Dude, everybody, this applies to everyone. Yeah. And so that has kind of been the precedent that the Supreme Court has upheld since.
Sure. I only brought that up because, just
that was a lot of history. But
well, understanding the history is important, but also I think when this was, as you say, sort of an assumed thing. So you think about the beginning, America is bustling with immigrants that are coming over and they're having babies and people becoming citizens. And we love that idea. We love the immigrants that formed this country. But that's different from what's happening now. Maybe it's not different. I would say part of the reason why Trump is doing this is because I think now we have people using almost a loophole, okay, let's have a baby in America so then we can sort of plant our proverbial flag there.
They're called anchor babies.
Yeah. No, there is a term for it. So
okay, let me ask you this.
Yeah, go for it.
So what child born on our soil would not have citizenship?
I believe it's children of diplomats.
Mm-hmm. So there are some.
Yeah, and then I think certain Native American tribes are exempted.
Yeah, that's its own.
That's its own thing. I not qualified to speak
and apparently
on that.
the children of enemy occupiers.
Yes.
So the Supreme Court has said that. So there are definitely. Okay, let me ask you this: if you have a child in Mexico and they're born in Mexico, what do you think Mexico's stance is on this? And I say that because on the last Well, we recorded it last. You haven't heard it yet as a podcast listener, but we did a conversation about prison and reform and things like that. And one of my arguments was I want Mexico's immigration policy.
Okay.
Do you know anything about Mexico's immigration policy? I mean, do you think that they do you think they take well to foreigners coming into their land and demanding
having
benefits?
anchor babies?
I'm just gonna assume based off the way you're phrasing this question that no.
Yeah, probably like every nation on earth actually doesn't allow people to come into their nation and say, "Gimme." Right, give me. I need an EBT card. I need free education. I need health care. I'm going to show up at your emergency room and demand health care. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Wait, and by the way, just to
show up to the
clarify,
emergency room
also,
and not pay health care?
Wait, real quick. Also, just to clarify, only one parent has to be on the path towards citizenship here. So it's if two parents are completely illegal and undocumented, that's what we're talking. That's where the question mark is. If you have an illegal, undocumented person that has a baby with their husband or their wife is a permanent resident even.
Yeah.
That's fine. So this is not about, I mean, people will be like, it's the dreamers. Anyway, continue. I just want to clarify.
Well,
that.
no, I think that's important.
I just wanted to establish, though, that you agree that there are situations where people born here shouldn't be granted automatic citizenship. So it's not just rooted here. And you would probably also agree that birthright citizenship is not some kind of right every other nation does, and we're the outlier. We're, in fact, the outlier.
Yeah, no, I think it's one of the best things about America, actually.
It's because of, slavery. I mean, the 14th Amendment is a slavery thing, and I think that they should have been more clear in their language. But one of the things the 14th Amendment does say is that subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So does an anchor baby if someone, I mean, you would agree that someone, if they just cross the border, fly in, and that's
while
another
they're
major,
in labor.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's another major change. Is like it would take 2 months to, or a month or whatever to be on a boat from some country to come here. Now you can, fly here in a matter of hours. So, you would probably agree that if someone comes here just to have a baby here, that child should not be granted citizenship, right?
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that.
Okay, but how would that baby be subject to the jurisdiction thereof?
Well, if you're living in the United States, then you're subject to the jurisdiction thereof, right? Like.
Yeah.
If I'm a tourist in the United States, I can't just like set a building on fire and be like, no, but I'm a tourist, like Germany law, right? Like, no, I would be arrested. I would be, so if you're going to be subject to the laws, then I think, it makes sense that you should also be granted some of the, that's kind of the social contract, right? Like, if I'm going to be subjected to these laws, then I, and paying my taxes and all of this other stuff, then it doesn't really matter to me what the status of your parents are. I think you should be allowed to receive some of those benefits.
Paying taxes is an interesting twist. I mean, babies don't pay taxes, but I mean,
they will pay taxes, right? And,
maybe.
And historically, we've done studies on this. Undocumented migrants actually tend to pay more in taxes than they receive. They're a net positive to. I want to be careful with my words, at least to Social Security, right? Because a lot of them have to get fake Social Security numbers in order to work. The IRS is totally aware of this and allows them to, because even though they're paying Social Security tax, they're not actually eligible to receive anything in turn.
Right. Well, that's why both parties support illegal immigration, is because they want them to pay into FICA. They want them to pay into. Let me finish. I
don't tend to disagree. I think that if you're going to pay into it, you should get something out.
Let me finish, please.
Yeah,
so they pay into Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. They may never get the benefit of that, so they're helping with that demographic bubble of the boomers being born and fewer people paying in and more people using the services. However, do you know about how much it costs to educate one child in your average public school in America?
I know it's I know it's significant. I don't know the exact number
anywhere
off the
from
top of my
$10,000 to
head.
$20,000.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's if they have children in our schools, then that's an additional cost. Are they paying that much, or in property taxes to offset that? So I don't know. I if you look at the cumulative, and what I was saying about the emergency room is that if anyone goes to an emergency room, whether they have a gold card, a Medicaid card, insurance, they're going to be treated. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
And that is what happens in a lot of places where there are a lot of immigrants. If you look at, say, I don't know, the southern border in Texas, they will tell you, yes, we can't go to the ER because it's an 8-hour wait because there's all these people there.
Sure.
And so that becomes a first line of defense for healthcare, which puts citizens, on the back, on the back burner for care. So those are costs, what I'm saying? So it's like, well, they might pay into Social Security that they don't use, so they might be a net positive, but there are many other costs to a society, and that's why other countries don't do it. That's why I'm saying, why is it that America has to? I mean, I would agree with you on immigration if we had no welfare state. Would you make that deal with me?
If we actually
no
kind of the
entitlements?
opposite. No, I don't think I would
opposite?
agree
So
with
we
that.
should take in almost everybody, give them citizenship if they're born here, and pay for their health care, their school, if they're poor, housing. I mean, what would you say a limit is?
So I think, a few things here, right? So to me at least, I think that the best solution for some of this is actually to for people who, you know, aren't committing crimes, aren't affiliated with a gang, like we are on the same page that, like, yeah, no, if you're
criminal.
Yeah, like if they can like credibly prove that you're part of like MS-13, I know is like the big one that everybody's aware of, then like, yeah, you should maybe be deported. Like that's fair.
Fair,
That's
yeah,
fine, fair enough, right?
Almost certainly. You should be deported.
But I actually think that the best solution here would be to give them a path towards citizenship, so that they are able to start paying all the other taxes and start paying into.
Just because they want to be here?
Yeah, I don't see any reason why I shouldn't let them in.
Because we don't need them. I mean, that could be a reason.
Or we can't
I'm
afford
not
them.
saying we don't need them.
So this is like one of those things where it's like so if I'm gonna balance my like biblical convictions with like the reality, you know, with kind of this realpolitik, like the practicalities of all of that, like my conviction from scripture is that we welcome the immigrant, right? Like full stop. Like the Bible tells us over and over again to welcome the immigrant, to treat them as your own, right? Like Jesus says that those in Deuteronomy it says that you are to welcome the immigrant and treat them as your own, right? Like that is like very specific language that it uses. And then Jesus, you know, says that like welcoming the stranger is tantamount to, you know, welcoming Jesus himself, right? Yeah. Christ himself. And I think that we need to take that very seriously. Obviously there are going to be challenges to this. You know, especially as long as, and I know we disagree on this, right? But as long as we continue to give tax cuts to, you know, billionaires and millionaires.
You agree with Trump then? He said the other day we should have a billionaire's tax.
I think that we should.
It's an easy question.
Well, but also it's getting us derailed. So let me.
No, you're right. No, in that instance, I would agree with that. No, absolutely. No. Okay, fine. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
But again, right? Like I don't know if millionaires is really like billionaires is really the class that we got to go after. You know.
Okay, but pause for a second.
Millionaires is a great start. I'm all on board with that.
There's not enough money.
Okay, but let's go back to this idea.
Maybe that's why we need socialism.
Okay.
Woo!
We're
Just
never
drop that bomb. Let's go.
Oh my gosh. You'll have a lot less money a lot faster, but okay.
Like y'all don't even need me here. Here's the question though. When you're talking about Deuteronomy and what the Bible says about welcoming the foreigner, the Bible also talks about things like leaving margins on the land for the foreigner to glean and that kind of thing. So there's
not intermarrying.
And
that sounds like
there. Oh my gosh! Now you want me finished.
That sounds like welfare to me.
Well, what I was going to say was there does seem to be a distinction between nations, especially in Leviticus when God is going on and on about not mixing, not intermarrying. It's partly because of pagan worship, but he's setting like this nation is separate, this nation is separate.
Yeah.
None of them is more or less loved, but I mean, could be if they follow God, right? But there is a distinction. So I think the question for you is, as a believer, where do you see the distinction as a nation? Like, what distinguishes a nation?
Right. So first off, I think it's important to look at that in light of the New Testament, right? Where Paul says there is now neither Greek nor Jew, you know, male nor female.
But what does Paul say that about? He says that about salvation.
He is talking about salvation, but I think it is part of this larger ethic, right? Like when you see Jesus in the parable of the Good Samaritan, right? Like the whole point of one of the main themes of that parable is that back in the day, neighbor had this kind of like narrow communal view of like my neighbor is the member of my community that
literal neighbor.
But Jesus expands that, right? And by the time you get to Revelation, it's like all the nations of the earth are coming together in the great, beautiful New Jerusalem, right?
Yes.
And so if I'm trying to make heaven look more like, if I'm trying to make earth look more like heaven, then that's what we should be doing.
But when Jesus talks about the Good Samaritan, the guy that's talking to him before he gives that parable says, "Who is my neighbor?" Jesus gives this parable, and the point before that was to love your neighbor. So the guy is essentially asking, "Who should I love?" And then Jesus gives this parable to say, "You should love even the enemy, right? And that's like gospel language right there. Like,
right.
even
Yeah,
God loves his
exactly.
enemy.
You should love
but it doesn't,
all.
Loving someone can look very different. That doesn't mean you necessarily let them have full access to your nation. So that's why I'm asking what.
Sure, but I definitely think it means caring for them. I think it means caring for their material needs, and that it means ensuring that they have safety, shelter, that they're not going to starve to death, right? And
so is there any limit to how many people could swarm in? Hey guys, Sarah Stone here. Sorry to interrupt what I'm sure is a riveting podcast episode, but Theology by the Pint needs your help to continue providing these podcasts, offering our in-person events, and growing so we can bring thoughtful conversation and the hope of the gospel to a world that's increasingly walking away from church and from faith. Now that we're a 501c3 nonprofit, all donations are tax deductible, so we've crunched the numbers, and if each listener of this episode gave just $1 for each episode you listen to, we'd put a huge dent in our annual budget. So consider giving today. Go to theologybythepint.org/give and click the link to donate. Thanks so much, and now back to our show.
And
then I'm going to stop being mean.
No, that's fair. That's a fair question. I think we have to be. Look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm like some kind of like tax policy expert. I'm sure that there are practical challenges
to 8 million people coming to America. I mean, there's got to be a limit,
right? To welcoming in people, right? And yeah, like there should be certain limitations to it. There might be some way of saying like, hey, you're here, you're allowed to stay here, but like, you have to get in queue to receive these social benefits, right? Since you didn't come through this other process. I think that there are ways to work around that. I'm also, listen, here's the white pill. Post-apologetic is what we're calling it, right? God promises that the nation that welcomes the immigrant as its own will be blessed. And will be blessed by God in order to provide both for themselves and for the people who are in need, such that there will be not a single poor person in the land.
What is poor?
I would say
what is your threshold of poverty?
I would say anybody who does not have ready access to the necessary means of life, right? So like shelter, food, water, healthcare.
Of the 15 million immigrants that came in under Biden's presidency, for example, how many of them were in that situation?
I think many of them were in that situation when they left. I don't know exactly. I would say most of them were when they left, but maybe not when they got here.
Yeah.
Well, but also to your point.
And I want to take God seriously on that promise.
I do too. And I think I don't want to say aspirational because God is not just sort of like one day, but it is this cosmic idea that eventually that will be the case. But Jesus says you will always have the poor among you. Like it's a reality until the New Jerusalem comes down from heaven that there will be poor people among you. I don't think there's any guarantee that we're going to be so blessed by God here and now that nobody's poor.
I'd like to make this point.
Yeah, please.
Okay. The reason we have nations
I have thoughts about that quote, but sorry.
The reasons we have nations is so that we can properly allocate resources. Okay. Economics is the study of the distribution of scarce resources. Okay. There's only so much food in the world. There's only so much water in the world. There's only so much in a functioning world, only so much money in the world. But we print it, so that doesn't really work. So the point is that just like as in a family, there are a certain number of resources that have to be allocated. And we have a call as Christians to share some of our wealth with other people who need it. But if we open up the house, the doors of our household to everyone who needs something, you will quickly find that you don't have anything left to share. Okay? So you actually have to marshal and protect your resources for your people, whatever that means for now, for your people, for the people that within a limited household, community, state, or nation, so that you have resources to share. And this is the whole point of having a nation and having limitations on the sort of welfare, broadly speaking, that you offer people. If our threshold of poverty was poorer than the United States, since we're the richest nation on earth, 8 billion people, by your standard, would have a right to come in here and pillage everything we have. And within 30 minutes, we would have nothing left to give. And we would look like those other nations, like, I don't know, failed states, like Haiti, that have nothing, that are totally dysfunctional, that are terrible places to live, that where good, godly Christian people are, under threat of being cannibalized or something crazy like that. So, I mean, surely you don't want total dysfunction. If you want to preserve what civilization and function that we have, you have to put limits around the resources that you possess so that you can share with the most possible people.
Yes. So
okay. So what are the limits to immigration? You haven't said yet. You said, well, maybe this and maybe that. What is a limit?
So that's a good question. I reserve the right to change my mind on this because I'm kind of this fair. Is just off the top. I would say that the limit is when like if I don't know, I'm gonna spitball here. I'd say like once like 50%, 60% of our nation's budget is like welfare, right? I am.
That's interesting.
Look, I'm a socialist. I'm not apologetic about that. I absolutely understand that there are that scarcity exists, right? That there are limits in like how much that we can give people. I just think that in our current nation, where like half of our budget is spent on the military, I mean, if you want to talk about fraud and waste, there's a conversation to be happened there. Elon Musk, I'd go after the military industrial complex. But I think that
you and Evan can do that together.
Yeah, fantastic.
He might be your friend.
You ever listen to Steve Bannon?
What?
Okay.
Stop. Get out of here, bro. So I do think that
you don't even know I asked that question.
I don't know what the limit is. I just know that I don't think we're even close to that limit yet. I like the resources that migrants, undocumented or otherwise, receive are marginal. It is a fraction of the total budget. I think that this is a conversation that is worth having. I just don't think that we're even close enough to even approaching that limit to know what an appropriate limitation would be. I just know that the current limit that is being that is being argued for by the Trump administration, which is that like anybody who came here undocumented, all of them got to get deported. I think that's a bad limit. Yeah. But I'll admit, I don't specifically know what that upper limit's going to be. We haven't even approached it.
Well, I will say, if I could just finish with this. We have been fighting the war on poverty since, 1965. And the poverty, the poverty line, the number of people under the poverty line is the same.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we spent trillions and trillions of dollars on it. So, I mean, at some point, at what point do we say, well, we tried it. We tried redistribution of money. And it just didn't work. So maybe we actually need to think about compassion and charity in a different way.
Yeah.
I'm not saying don't be compassionate. In fact, I would say the way that we are compassionate, the way that socialists argue for it, is the most disgusting form of compassion that could ever be argued for.
Wow. Tell me how you really feel, Evan.
Yeah, it is. It is at the opposite end of what Christian charity actually is. Christian charity is personal. It's gospel-centered. It is. It's needs based. Mm-hmm. Socialism is impersonal. It's a blank check, and and we don't know what is done with the money. And there's definitely no spiritual component to it at all. It's just blank secular money from a welfare state, impersonal, and it hasn't worked.
So I have a statement and a question. Number one, I don't think that caring for the poor is a matter of charity. I think it is a matter of justice. I think it is about the state and private individuals working together to care for the poor. But it's there's that charitable component, but we also have a duty to do justice to the poor. The poor have rights that must be upheld. That is what Deuteronomy says. That's what the prophet says.
Do they have any obligations?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What are they?
You would hope that as much as they're able to, that they would be able to contribute productively to society.
So do you agree with
maybe from each according to their ability, to each according to right?
From each according to their ability, to each according to
their needs. He said, hey, he knows it better than I do.
That's Marxism.
But yeah, exactly. Okay. I'm a socialist. Okay. But then number two, how are you defining socialism? Just so I'm clear on what we're talking about.
I would say probably from each according to his ability, to each according to his
needs. Oh my gosh.
Okay, no, I think that's a great definition.
Isn't that nice?
How that gets played out in the actual organization of the economy. So I personally think that welfare is just a Band-Aid on the back end. I think that if there is a more democratic organization of the economy at the front end, right, where like corporations are cooperatively owned and everybody whose labor contributes to the production of that corporation also has a say in how that wealth is used and how that organization is run, then I think that a lot of the welfare that has to be taped on at the back end wouldn't be necessary, because on the front end people would be receiving what is due their wages instead of constantly being robbed and ripped off by corporations.
Okay, we are going to have to put a big pin in that.
I know.
Because you just opened up a whole can.
I know.
We found our next...
back. Bring me back on.
I know. I'm like already dreaming of events that he can be our guest speaker for, because we've had guest speakers come before that are socialist.
But I just want to say, I mean, not to get the last word, but...
Yeah, no, please.
Okay, but like, people in my position are always going to be put in the light of, oh, you don't care about poor people. No, I think our charity system, as it is, our compassion, our social justice, whatever you want to call it, system, doesn't work. It fundamentally doesn't work. It pays people to remain in poverty. It enables poverty. I'm not an enabler. I want to help people get out of poverty.
Yeah.
So, and for those, I appreciate that you actually said, the poor have some obligations, because there are people who would say they have no obligations. Well, guess what? They're never going to get out of poverty, and then they're just stealing from me, to distribute to them. And I think theft is unjust. So, it's a complicated thing. Like, at some point, taking money from me to give to someone else by the threat of a gun, which is what taxes are, that is theft at some point. Now, it might be reasonable at a certain amount. Like, I don't know, God said 10%, so maybe 10% is a reasonable amount of tax to pay. But beyond that, to give money to causes that I think are fundamentally unjust, like killing people in the Middle East, or
That's a great segue to our next one.
Let's go.
Okay, we got to move on.
Oh man, I
seized your segue.
I'm sorry.
Anyway, don't be sorry. You're doing exactly what we asked.
My point is that I'm not anti-compassion.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
To be clear. But Middle East, what's going on there? It sounds like a war zone.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I don't know if you've heard, but there is conflict in the Middle East.
What?
So this is an article specifically about Trump's visit of the Gulf states and a recent potential
peace deal.
I wouldn't even necessarily call it a peace deal. Maybe like a ceasefire deal that seems to have been kind of like flagrantly broken by us. I don't have his specific name in front of me. Wickoff, yeah, Wickoff.
Trump's right-hand man.
Wickoff allegedly negotiated this peace deal with Hamas, and said that at the end of if Hamas would release one of the American captives as a gesture of goodwill, then at the end of Trump's tour of the Gulf states, Trump would advocate for a ceasefire and advocate for Israel to end the siege on Gaza and allow food, medicine, water, all of that back into Gaza.
Okay.
That did not happen.
They released.
They released Alexander, and Trump did not. America in general did not do what was promised. This article also goes into Trump's humanitarian plan for Gaza. There are a lot of issues with this. That would, there's going to be extensive political vetting. Just to read from the article, the White House has said that it would impose a newly created non-governmental organization to formally run the program alongside U.S. security and contractors. This proposal for aid distribution involves a system of political vetting and calorie restrictions. It would require Palestinians to travel long distances and pass extensive security checks to receive meager rations. And then Israel forces, skipping down a bit, while Israel forces would not distribute the aid, the army would be involved with security, which I often also see as a bit of an issue, especially after the flour truck massacre. So that's that. And mostly this is, have you had a pro-Palestinian voice on the podcast before?
Mildly. I mean,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sarah's almost there.
So I like, this is a good starting point, but like my main purpose in bringing this article forward is it is relevant. It is good for us to remember the atrocities that Israel is committing and the immense suffering that the Palestinians are experiencing. But I also kind of just wanted to use this as like a segue to offer
in general,
like a 10 toes down pro-Palestinian perspective.
Okay, let me clarify a couple terms for our audience. Two things. When you say the atrocities that Israel is doing, what do you mean?
So so I would say that the bombing of hospitals, schools, first aid crews,
so all the places where Hamas
workers,
is hiding.
According to the people committing the genocide, yes.
You think it's genocide?
I absolutely think it's genocide.
Interesting.
I also, in addition to that, Israel has been like blatantly caught assassinating journalists. I don't think they were all Hamas. They have repeatedly besieged and blockaded Gaza, denying aid, water, food, electricity to the people of Gaza.
Okay, let me ask you another question.
I could keep going, but we would literally be here all day.
Yeah, well, what would your proposed solution be for, say you're Israel and Hamas has attacked your people the way they did on October 7th? What do you think they ought to do if they find out that there are huge contingencies of Hamas members and their equipment honeycombed into these, say, a hospital?
Yeah. So,
and let's just say for funsies that Israel went ahead and warned everyone to get out. Oh, they did that. So then what do you think Israel should do?
So a few things, right? Number one, a lot of civilian deaths for a bunch of people who are warned to get out ahead of time. Israel has also been caught what's known as double tapping, where they will bomb a building, they will wait for civilians and first aid workers to come to like dig people out of the rubble, and then they will strike it again.
Right.
So like, yeah, they might have been warned to get out the first time, but not the second time. Second off, like,
how many times does somebody get? I mean, I'm sorry, but if someone quote taps my building, I'm out of there. But okay, but
if my family is under the rubble, right? Like, I might go back for them.
If the soldiers come to me ahead of time, they're like, "We're coming through to get the terrorists. Get out."
So I think, to get to the original question, right? This is the question. I heard this question very early on in the conflict, and it has kind of stuck with me, right? If Hamas was hiding amongst Israeli civilians, would they be using the same tactics that they are now?
That's a great question.
And I don't think so. I think that they would be much more precise in the way that they are going about things. I don't think that they would bomb whole buildings. I think that they would be sending in teams.
Like a surgical strike kind of thing.
I think that they would be much more thorough in their research of places. So like one of the places where Hamas was like allegedly hiding and storing weapons was Al-Shifa Hospital, right? And like Israel created this whole beautiful 3D graphic about all the tunnels that were underneath. Hamas was definitely there. We've got to bomb this hospital. And then they arrived and searched it, and the tunnel network never materialized. And
it wasn't there, or
it wasn't there. It wasn't there. Like it's not that it like had collapsed in the bombs. There was no tunnel network. So I'm gonna generously assume that maybe they just had bad intel. Fog of war stuff happens. But I think that I understand that civilian casualties happen, especially in a densely populated urban war zone, right? I think we also have to be careful about using that as an excuse, because any student of history knows, like, war is the favorite cover for genocide, right? And so again, I think that Israel should have been much more precise with like boots on the ground, verifying things, and not just leveling whole sections of Gaza.
I have one third clarifying question.
Certainly not blockading aid and food from going in.
And I think we could find articles on either side for multiple things that you've said about how it was done. But
I'll post all my links in the comments of the video.
Cool, I can find some too.
Yeah, sweet.
But my third clarifying question would be, when you say you're, quote, pro-Palestinian, let me be clear. I think everybody in the room hates when any innocent civilian is killed in war. Yeah. Right? I mean, on both sides.
Yeah.
Yes. So I don't want innocent Palestinians killed at all. I think it's horrible. And so when we joke in this show that I'm the burn it down lady, because I wish Israel would just basically carpet bomb the whole thing.
Oh.
Not really, but almost. Because I think Hamas is really, truly evil. Okay. That said, I don't want civilians to die. I know that happens in war. So my question to you is, when you say Palestinians, do you mean Palestinians that are not Hamas? Do you mean Palestinians that don't support Hamas? Like, where's the sort of the line that says, like, these are the Palestinians that we should be really caring for and being so careful that we're boots on the ground, surgical striking?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think that this is going to be, I want to be very careful with my words here, right? Because there is nuance here. I believe that Palestine is that Israel is an apartheid state, that is that what they're doing to Palestinians is illegal and unlawful under international law, right?
Even considering that many, many, many Palestinians live peaceably and work peaceably in Israel, not in the reverse. I mean, that seems really weird to call them an apartheid state if there are millions of Arabic Palestinian people coming in and working there and coming and going peacefully.
So we can quibble over like I didn't mean that sounded dismissive. We should be careful in the way we use apartheid. The reason I use that word is because that is what figures like Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu used to describe Palestine, right? I consider them the experts on apartheid. And so if they think that is an appropriate term to describe what is happening in Gaza, then I'm...
Good enough for them, good enough for you.
Exactly, right? Like, I'm not going to claim to know more than Mandela. But so I do think that under those conditions, Palestinians have a right to protest, to resist their circumstances. I think that they have a right to armed resistance against their circumstances. I do not think that they have a right to commit the sort of atrocities that Hamas has committed.
That's a good distinction.
Yes, I do not support that. I do not support the terrorism and the atrocities committed by Hamas. I want to make that very clear because I know that has been a dicey subject lately. That said, I'm not. So first off, half you asked about civilians who support Hamas. Yeah. So half the population is underage, right? So like they didn't vote for Hamas. They have nothing to do with Hamas being in power.
That doesn't mean they don't support them. But,
right. Even the ones who do support Hamas. Like I have to be sympathetic to if you're watching your country being destroyed, and this is the only group that is trying to put up any kind of resistance to the genocide of your people. I might make alliances. I might support an organization that under better conditions
you might not.
I would never even consider supporting.
They're in a terrible situation. I will grant you that. Yeah. Let me pinpoint it down to one, like an example.
So I don't think that makes them guilty and worth what has been done to them.
Okay, so let's say shortly after the October 7th thing happened, there was that interview with that grandma, and she had an inordinate number of children and grandchildren, and some of them had been killed while they were trying to kill Israeli people. And I don't know if you remember, she said, I would be glad, I would be like excited if all of them were killed while trying to murder Jews because they hate Jews so much. This is an old lady saying this. It was so horrifying to hear her say it.
Yeah.
Is she an enemy of Israel?
The little old lady?
The lady that's so supportive of Hamas. She says they should do it again. I fully support it. I wish all my family would die. Praise be to Allah. because they're trying to kill Jews, and that's the overarching thing. We want them all dead, from the river to the sea. Is she an enemy of Israel?
Yeah, I think that she probably is. Again, right? Like, I think first off, I think it's interesting that I very rarely hear Israeli politicians and officials kind of held to account for their words in the same way, right? When they're calling them all animals, stuff like that. I think that she is an enemy of Israel because, again, Israel is committing an apartheid against her. Is committing a genocide against her and her people. I think she's absolutely an enemy. And listen, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that, like, you know, if the war stops tomorrow, we're all going to, like, get together and sing Kumbaya and like, but 2 points that I think are important to make is, number one, Palestinians do not have the ability to end the apartheid peacefully, right? They do not have the power. They are the occupied, they have been occupied. They have been oppressed. Only Israel has the power to end this peacefully. Number two, I also think that if the concern is Israel safe, like the safety of Israel, of Israelis, and specifically the Jewish people in Israel, which that matters, right? Like, I don't want civilians, innocents dying, whether Israeli Jews or Palestinians, whatever. I don't think that what has been done in Palestine is making anyone safer, right? All it has done is radicalize the Palestinians. I think we could agree about that, right? Like if we want, wiping them all out is not the solution, and so the only other solution is to cease hostility, establish a permanent ceasefire, grant the Palestinians rights and what they need in order to live a dignified life, and work from there to, like, de-escalate the situation.
Is this assuming that they kill off all of Hamas? Because I got to tell you, I'm having a hard time thinking about the fact that if someone came and murdered my family, raped my daughter, put my babies in the oven, right?
Totally
had a rape captain, all those things. No, but let me finish, because if they go off and they honeycomb themselves in, that I'm supposed to be like, well, we really can't get them out without doing anything bad to those people that, by the way, most of them by surveys still support that and say that if the choice were to do it again, they would do it. Palestinians, something like 70-something% of them would say, again, they would support an October 7th event. Then be like, let's just let them live peaceably. Let's grant them the right.
If they know what the limits of your warfare are, then they're just going to do that. So if they know that Israel won't bomb a hospital, then that's just where they're going to put their military operation. So Israel can't play by those rules.
I still don't. This might just be a fundamental disagreement we have. I still don't think that gives you justification to bomb a hospital. Find some other way of accomplishing your task there.
You don't think if they put missiles and tunnels under hospitals that makes it a target?
If there are civilians being treated in that hospital, absolutely not.
You don't think Hamas
That's
is
a great way to do it then. Just put one civilian in there that's sick.
Yeah. I mean, basically, you would use the, I haven't said anything.
Sorry.
Okay. You're using the kindness then of Israel against them. And that, I think, is kind of particularly evil and cruel. But
okay.
I just want to say this, that so in a past episode, I kind of used the way that Bukele and El Salvador dealt with MS-13, and I think it's the 18th Street Gang, or there's another gang there that he made illegal.
Right.
And in the way that in Germany, like, Nazi paraphernalia is illegal. Okay? You cannot walk around with a swastika flag in Germany. It's against the law. Mm-hmm. Do you agree with that? Do you agree that MS-13 in El Salvador? Like,
I think specifically within Germany, that's an agreeable. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not trying to, like, mince words. I've just genuinely never thought about it. I don't want to.
Okay. Well, here's the corollary I'm making. Okay. Hamas should be illegal. Like, Hamas, not the Palestinian people. Hamas as an organization should not exist, and that's what Trump has said. For example, he has said, and I want to get back to the title of this article as well. Trump has said that we can have, he's built out some kind of NGO to, like, be compassionate or whatever. And he and, by the way, Netanyahu aren't really getting along. I mean, he's going on Netanyahu's back a lot, so which he should be getting credit for, but he's not. And
that Trump should be getting credit for what?
For basically going around Netanyahu and really to his face, I would argue, working out deals with, for example, I don't want to get sidetracked.
Yeah.
I'm just saying Trump never gets credit.
I will give him
That's your tagline.
He followed through on no taxes on tips in his new budget proposal. So I give him credit for that.
Yeah. And work requirements for Medicaid people. That's why I was asking about that earlier. But
yeah.
Okay, but here's the deal. I think that if the Palestinian people would agree to a Hamas-free Palestine, I think they could have a ceasefire right now. But they won't. And I think there has been precedent set for when there are organizations or a group of people who have done such heinous things that they don't get to exist anymore. MS-13 does not get to exist in El Salvador. Period. If they put the MS-13 insignia on their tombstone, they destroy it. If they have a tattoo, they go to jail. I mean, it's pretty hardcore. You might think that's some kind of violation of civil rights or something, but I happen to not
I tend to think so. Yeah, that's kind of how dictatorships happen.
But I want to get back to the headline because it's kind of funny when you really think about it that Hamas is mad. These are the people that killed 1,500 people on October 7th. This is a terrorist organization.
Have been torturing the hostages for 3 years.
Torturing all these hostages.
And they paid for it in blood. Okay.
Yeah, and so these are the people that are like, golly, the American negotiator didn't keep his word.
There is something kind of funny about that.
I mean,
sure.
I'm sorry, but like Trump's job is to get Americans home, and that's what he did. There was one more American hostage, and he got him home. And I don't know. Now, I would like to see humanitarian aid for people in need who are true victims.
Mm-hmm.
The Palestinian people are the victims of the Hamas.
Yes,
of Hamas. Well, that's why I don't understand. Would you don't agree to that?
I think that Hamas is a symptom of Israeli oppression and apartheid. That's what they are victims of. When you make peaceful resistance impossible, the only alternative is violent resistance. That is not me condoning violence, but that is a recognition that Hamas would not exist if they had been given if we go all the way back to the 1920s, right? Like if they had not been subjected to an apartheid state to begin with, then Hamas would have never sprung into existence, right?
So you think if they'd had their own land, their own capacity to rule their land, and nobody bothering them about that there never would have been an extremist group that would have risen up that wanted to kill Jews?
No, absolutely not.
What?
Jewish and Muslim people lived together peacefully in the Ottoman Empire for centuries. In fact, many Jewish people fled Europe for the Ottoman Empire because they were treated better there.
Okay, you know what? You may be right. I will concede. I don't know, and we could never know. It just seems to me like there's a lot of anti-Jew hate that doesn't seem to be about, we just want this land. Because it feels like they've had land. They've had, I don't know. Maybe I'm speaking out of depth.
And they had the West Bank.
I think so.
I mean, if you look at the borders of Israel in 1948, 49, it was, I don't know, half of what it is now. No, I'm not defending everything Israel does, by the way.
Sure.
Neither of these groups are Christian, and that ultimately is the problem.
They don't
worship.
I don't know if I agree with that, but
well, that's what I would say. I think they all need to be evangelized, all of them.
Okay.
But I would say that for now, the only you cannot have terrorists. You can't have a terrorist state in your midst. You just can't have it. So Palestine, whatever's left of it, Gaza, whatever, it cannot have Hamas. And essentially Israel's not going to stop fighting until Hamas is eliminated.
Yeah, I understand that. I think take it for what it's worth, right? You might not believe Hamas on this, but Hamas has said that if Israel would agreed to a permanent ceasefire, would restore the I believe it's 1978 borders, and allow them either to have some kind of standing military, whether it not Hamas but the Palestinians to have a standing military, even if it's like a UN thing, then Hamas would disband. You take that for what it really.
So basically,
right?
That's kind of like Ukraine saying, well, let's see. If you just give us back all the land that you won from us, we'll be at peace.
That you violently stole from us.
Kind of not how it works. Again, the question is, if you go to war with Israel and you lose the land. Sorry, that's kind of how it goes.
I think we might just have like a fundamental disagreement here, because I don't think that No, I don't think that's justified. I think if you violently seize land from another country, that you are in the wrong. You are occupying stolen land and should be given back.
Do you think in the late 1940s, when Israel was established, that was a violent seizure of land that was wrong? I don't know much about it, so I really don't. There were Jews who opposed it. There were Jews who were in favor of it.
And to be fair, right, there were tons of Palestinians who So the main piece of conflict there is the fact that Palestine had been promised its own sovereignty as a state if they would rise up against the Ottoman Empire during World War I, which they did, and then Britain was like, hey, so here's the thing, we actually cut this other deal with Jewish people, and so you're actually not getting a sovereign state. Sorry, right? And so under those circumstances, think about it, do you know any Texan who would be okay if they were like, hey, so we're actually just going to give, it wasn't even 50%, it was something like 78% of your land to Canada. Hope that's okay. But guys, look, you get 22%. What are you complaining about, right?
No Texan would go for that.
No, we would succeed, it would be, all the slogans would come true,
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think after World War II, they would say, "Well, did you see the bodies piled up at Auschwitz?" And they would say, "Where do these people go to be safe?" I think that's what they would say. And,
I think
and there are now, a rising group of kind of, neo-Nazis who are like, well, that's why Holocaust denial is sort of, in a way in vogue again, because they're like, well, they only use the Holocaust. To justify, giving you the land. And it was really this whole big scheme and plot the whole time. I mean, I don't read a lot of neo-Nazi literature.
Yeah. Well, and what's funny is also a lot of neo-Nazis also support Israel because they're like, send the Jewish people away, right? Like they can go over there. We just don't want them here, right? So I'm sure there's on both sides, Neo-Nazis are morons. I don't expect them to make a lot to
Well, see, there we can all agree.
Yeah.
Neo-Nazis
bad.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, how much longer do we have?
We're just gonna go till we have to stop.
We'll try to go fast. Those are both really big topics. This was something that had kind of a lot of overlap. I mean, White Pill Radio is about kind of theological, political kind of topics. So and I'll just summarize it very quickly. You probably know that there's some Afrikaners, South Africans, who Trump, brought. Speaking of immigration, brought, for safekeeping, brought into the United States, and the Episcopal Church has. Basically a refugee resettlement program that got a lot of money and helped a lot of people resettle during the Biden administration. The bishop that spoke at Trump's kind of inaugural service, like the day after his inauguration, who was kind of so famous, they ended up finding, I don't know, the Episcopal Church got over $50 or $60 million, for this purpose. Now they're saying, we're not going to do that. We're not going to help these Afrikaners, resettle in America. We're not going to help them find a place to live or a job or whatever it is that you need to resettle. And because that's just not what we do. And the pretty strong implication seems to be, they're white. They don't.
What?
We don't really help. What's that?
It's
what?
Oh, okay. Is that a South Park?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a Shane Gillis.
You sounded like Cartman there for a minute. Okay. Anyway,
I often do.
So that was one of those things. As someone who's a Lutheran, having grown up in the ELCA. Their kind of sister it used to be called Lutheran Immigration and Relief Services. I can't remember. They changed the name. But they got, I think, over $1 billion for the same thing. So they did all this border stuff. So you hear about Catholic Charities and the Lutherans. They're talking about LIRS, whatever their new name is, that helped all these people, in theory, resettle. What I think they were doing is probably more like human trafficking, literally helping people who cross the border illegally because it's against the law. It should be to come into our country, without whatever it is you need to do so, an invitation, for example, and they help resettle them. But now that it's these folks from South Africa, it's crickets, so that seems very demonstrative. By the way, it's extremely embarrassing as well, because sort of people that in the conservative space anyway, they look at this and they go, oh, what are those Lutherans up to? What are the Episcopalians up to? What's wrong with these people?
Well, let's clarify for the audience if they don't know that the situation, so they're white, but they are claiming, and Trump is claiming that they have refugee status because they are running away from a bunch of murders that are happening of the white African farmers.
Right.
So it's happening to farmers of all races.
Okay.
I think that's an important clarification there.
I understood from what I listened to that most of the farmers in that region happen to be white, because of the shift that's happened over the last few decades there.
So yeah,
No, it's been that way for centuries because
of apartheid.
Well, apartheid applied to all races. First of all, you do know there are lots of tribes there that don't like each other.
I know, I understand, but I'm saying like specifically the reason why 72% of the private land is owned by whites is because of like colonialism and apartheid.
Well, there's no doubt that the Dutch colonizers, owned a lot of the land, and they are the vast majority of farmers. And they're very good farmers, and they're very successful farmers. And so there have been these moves here and there. In fact, Blake, I don't remember his last name. He works with Charlie Kirk. He used to work with Tucker Carlson, and he brought this up on like Tucker's old show that, this kind of comes up where all of a sudden there's like, time to go kill the white farmer. But they usually kind of scale that back because that's what they did in Zimbabwe. I don't know if you know how successful
I do know about Zimbabwe. Yeah, no, that was
kind of starvation territory.
Yeah.
They have $1 trillion bill basically because inflation is so out of control. So a failed state. And so I think there's this kind of pull and tug in South Africa where it's like, well, we do need food, and they are good farmers. So the rate at which we kill about 50 per year, which is about how many white farmers are killed, and sometimes in quite savage ways, often in savage ways, or farm workers, it has led enough people to think, yeah, well, maybe the odds of me getting killed by, ruffians who come onto my property is like 1 in 100, given how many white farmers there are in the whole country of South Africa. But that's enough for me to want to go to America. And Trump said, okay, you can come.
Yeah.
And so, and the hypocrisy is, after all the talk about the immigrant and welcoming the stranger and all of that, because those are the very terms the Episcopal Church will use to help the 15 million people who came on under Biden's watch with NGO money that our federal government gave them. All of a sudden, those 59 people, no, can't help them. Don't you think that's wrong or what?
So a few things, right? Number one, I think important context here, even according to the article that you sent me, right? Those 50 farmers that were killed, we don't have exact statistics about like the racial breakdown of, right? So that like, maybe it was majority white.
You think it's a problem of like white people killing black farmers?
Well, like black people are black people in South Africa are like statistically more likely to be victims of violent crimes than white people in general. So it wouldn't surprise me if the breakdown of that was not majority white. But here, let's assume that everything in South Africa is as bad as these refugees are saying. I think the Episcopal Church's main contention, and the reason they chose to aid other refugee efforts, is that the white South Africans were fast-tracked and given precedent when Trump has shut down almost every other refugee program, or has severely curtailed every other refugee program. That seems, from what I've been able to read and find, that seems to be the main point of contention.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think there's also this language of assimilation that got messy with it because Trump or one of his advisors or somebody made some comments about how there would be faster assimilation because they shared some things in common with us. Not that they're white, but that they speak English, they're capitalist, like they already have some things in common with America such that they would be able to assimilate more quickly. So that language was used, and then people were saying, well, that's racist to say that they're more easily assimilated, so then we're not going to help them. And so that entered into the argument as well.
So I think when it comes to refugees, right, when you prioritize assimilation over need, right, because again, let's assume everything
every
is
bad
true,
thing is true. Yeah.
Right? Like when we're talking, like, I don't think that their circumstances even come close to like Sudanese refugees.
But you just said, let's assume everything's true. So
even assuming everything is true, right? Like it doesn't come close to like people fleeing war-torn countries like the Sudanese.
You don't think the fear of being murdered because you're a farmer makes you a worthy refugee?
I didn't say that.
Okay.
I said that it's when we're prioritizing like the ability to assimilate, rather than like the direness of the situation at home, the needs of the refugee.
See, I think that's a false dichotomy. I don't think he's saying we're only bringing them in because they're easy to assimilate. I think that was a side. It was like, and look at this added benefit, but we're bringing them in because they're in danger of losing their lives because they are white farmers. The whole kill the Boer thing.
Well, I mean, half of them aren't even farmers. They're like from urban areas.
Is that true?
Yes.
The people that are coming in, the refugees?
Yes.
Okay, I'd have to look. That's not what I've heard.
No, please. And like,
do you think they're in danger?
I would not be surprised if there was some bitterness left over from, like, apartheid. I
thought
don't.
They had a truth and reconciliation.
They did, and I think that by and large they are a great model of like how to decolonize in a mostly peaceful way. But I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that, like, not a single person had any bitterness in their heart. Like, obviously that's not true. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was some racially motivated murders there. I don't see any evidence that there is like an organized, targeted killing of white people in South Africa, especially
what
since...
does the Kill the Boer thing mean?
So it's an old revolutionary song.
Yeah.
And again, I'm gonna be honest here.
It means kill the white farmers. What it
I don't
means,
like
to answer
it.
the question.
I don't like it. No.
Okay.
I'm gonna get there. It's an old revolutionary song. It means kill the farmer, right? Some people have argued that, like, if we sang some song about killing antebellum's plantation owners, right? Mm-hmm. Does that mean we want to kill all white farmers in the modern day? Like, it's like Boer has specific context because of its like colonial past, is what they're arguing.
Yeah.
I personally think we shouldn't be singing that song. It could be misconstrued as a call to violence, right? Like, we're on the same page here. That said, like, the government has taken that seriously. They're prosecuting the murder, the farm attacks, and And again, like, the farm murders have been steadily going down, right? Like, if that seems like, if there is a danger that they are facing, that the government is aware of it and tackling it and like trying to lower crime. And so for that reason, I don't know if...
As I said, I think it kind of ebbs and flows. I think, because it's like there's an ongoing resentment. It's far from ideal. What we actually would like is for people to actually love each other.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe there to be some gratitude for farmers. I mean, I'm grateful to farmers. Mm-hmm. It would never occur to my mind to think, let me sing a song about killing corn farmers in Illinois. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, fair enough.
That'd be kind of crazy.
Fair enough.
And it would invite sanctions. It should invite sanctions from the international community, and I would definitely fast track those people to get here as soon as they could.
Faster than people fleeing war zones, though.
Yeah, we can't take in everyone from a war zone.
So then why do they get priority?
Yeah,
I guess is my question.
That's a great question.
Yeah, I think it is a good question. We do take a lot of people in from Somalia, from Sudan, from other failed states. We can't take in all of them, though.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
So is it just the number?
Might partly be the number.
That there was only 59 of them?
It's certainly a very manageable number. I mean, probably the whole number of all of the farmers in South Africa is probably quite low. And I don't know, maybe we do kind of view things like wars, you got to have to work that out. I mean, we can't go around and figure out every nation's problems. It's a civil war, or something like that. But if they are Christians being persecuted, there are Christians being persecuted in Nigeria right now.
Yeah.
So maybe we extend the olive branch to them as well. I think at some point we should have a conversation whether we prioritize Christians. That's where I'd actually like to go with this.
And that's another podcast too.
Yeah.
And yes, by the way, we do, because we are a Christian nation, and I think at some point we have to give up the danger of secularism, the false promises of secularism. At some point, we actually have to say, this is who we are. We're a Christian nation. If you don't want to be a Christian nation, if Saudi Arabia doesn't want to be a Christian nation, that's okay. Whatever, name your country. If they don't want to be a Christian nation, that's fine. But we are. That's who we are. That's what we want to be. That's the revolution that we are now going to bring about. And it would be a revolution. It would be a counter-revolution to the secular humanist revolution of, pick your decade, the 50s, the 60s, the 1880s, whenever it began. We would say it's a counter-revolution. We're going to be a Christian nation, and we're going to prioritize that because that is the core set of values under which we have peace. You agree peace is good?
I'm a big fan of shalom, yeah.
Yeah. So how do you have actual peace? What is it that actually brings about peace? And I would say a shared commitment to who your Lord and King are would be first and foremost. The teachings of Jesus would go a long way. Do the blacks in South Africa, are they Christian? Do they share the values of Jesus? I don't know.
Yeah,
do the Dutch farmers who are Dutch reformed by and large share our values? Yeah, actually they do. So do the Sudanese? I don't know. Are they engaged in a civil war? I don't know. So
So vote for Evan. And
no, I'm saying I think a nation. I mean, a fundamental question is: does a nation have the right to act in its own best interest?
Absolutely. I just don't know if Christian nationalism is in our best interest.
And
I think that's
for
the
sure is another
point of
conversation.
disagreement. Is I think Christian nationalism is incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
You can go back and listen to the podcast we did.
But actually, you
actually
already agreed with my premise.
Okay, sorry.
Because you're a Christian.
Okay, so you do think I'm a Christian?
Well, of course.
Yeah.
Okay. No. I didn't want to take that. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have made that assumption about you.
I think you're a Christian.
There are a lot of conservatives who don't think I am.
Okay. And you already agreed that a nation should act in its own best interest, which is what nationalism is.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're the same.
Well, I don't know if I would agree that that's what nationalism. I wouldn't agree that nationalism.
That's how I just defined it.
Acts. Okay. So well, I would disagree with that definition.
If you want to call me a nationalist, this is my nationalist philosophy. A nation should act in the interests of its own citizens.
Yeah, I think just the way I think where I just disagree with nationalism is how we define citizens is the main disagreement.
Yeah.
But you heard it here first. Joshua is a Christian nationalist. I'm kidding.
That's not. I vehemently reject
okay,
that.
Let's do
one more. Let's
do one more article.
Yeah. Do we want to talk about the transgender bill, or do we want to talk about premarital sex?
Oh, you weren't supposed to say the word.
It's okay to say that.
Oh, I'm not allowed to say.
No, it's okay to say the word.
Let's do this one because I want to do a little thought experiment.
Okay.
Since we are White Pill Radio and we're trying to, take this applied theology and apply it to these things. I have a question less about the actual law here and more about what we would do if we were in this place. So this is a article that says Colorado governor signs transgender bill into law. It turns out it's actually not as bad as it could be. But basically, Colorado signed this bill into law saying that if you misgender or dead name somebody, there can be legal action against you. Initially, it was going to be that in like a court situation, if you did all those things, that could be qualified as abuse. So like a parent could say that they were abusing their child if they dead named them. By the way, dead naming, of course, is using someone's original name, not the name they now go by or want to go by. So, and it often has to do with gender. So it was going to be abuse, but then they stepped it back and said, no. But if you misgender or you dead name somebody, then, you can come under legal action. Which I think, at least the conservatives in our bunch, I'm curious what you think about that. But I know at least Evan and I would say this is ridiculous. It's an assault to free speech and to just being able to speak the truth. So first, I'll just ask, what do you think about it? I'm curious, and then I'll ask you my thought experiment.
Yeah. So obviously, I come at this from a very different perspective than y'all do. I do think that gender dysphoria is a real thing. I think that transgender people are, I think that transgender people exist. They're valid, right? Like all that good stuff.
Same.
Now, as to whether or not this constitutes a limitation of free speech, or like should this be constituted as like discrimination? That's very tough because I do want to be very protective of free speech in the current political climate.
Yeah.
I think that my instinct is to right. It's difficult because I'm obviously not a trans man.
Well, let me catch it to you this way. Let's put it in an example so it'll make it sort of easy for the thought experiment. Let's say you're not married, right?
Not yet.
Okay, so let's say you're married and you and your wife have a baby, and then 12 or 13 years from now, your baby's name is Rose. She's born a girl, and she says that she wants to be a boy and she wants you to call her Tom. And your wife refuses. She's like, I know this is a phase. I'm sorry. I'm going to be as loving as I can, but I am not going to call this child Tom. My child's name is Rose. So she tries her best to maybe not even say the name, but when she does, she calls Rose down. Rose, come down. It's time for dinner. If you could report that and she could get in trouble. Do you think that's fair, or do you think that's silly, or what is your response to that? That's a sort of real life example.
First off, thankfully,
don't send your wife to jail, Josh.
No, sorry. Thankfully, I'm my girlfriend Kenna. We're on the same page about this issue. Love you, babe.
Oh, hi, Kenna.
She's a queen. But I was having this conversation with my mom actually before we came here, because she's not as woke as I am, right? And I think,
that's a great example. Then
please, for all the woke people who may listen to this, please forgive me if I'm not being if I'm not presenting like a good view of our position right now. So I would say, I think that if you, because of like your sincere conviction, right? You don't think that like, a man can become a woman, or that like trans people are, actually, that a trans woman is actually a woman.
Right.
Right. But you are trying to treat them in the most loving, respectful way possible. To me, that seems different from somebody who is coming at it from a religious perspective, but is like bullying, berating, like genuinely being hateful towards.
Almost using the name extra just to prove a point,
right.
kind of thing. Sure.
But again, this is, and I was talking to my mom about this. This is genuinely difficult for me, because if I want to be if I want to be consistent, right? If I want to have, there were people who sincerely, back in, like the days of slavery, right? There were people who genuinely had a genuine religious conviction that Black people were subhuman, right? And so I don't know. Like, I think we want to protect free speech. We want to protect religious liberty, but I think that we have also seen how those kind of sincere beliefs have also been used to horribly oppress people in the past. And I don't know what the middle ground is there.
Well, I mean, I would say they're two very different things, what you just described. So, but that goes back to our core beliefs about transgenderism and like, Black and white people both being humans deserving, that are made in God's image. So it's a little bit different, but but you didn't answer the question about, you have a daughter that wants to be, because that's where this is born out of. It was born out of custody cases.
Yeah.
So
should that be used? I think no. If again, so this was the distinction I was trying to make. Like, if she's like actively berating and bullying,
sure,
my child because of that, then yeah, I think that should be a relevant factor.
That already is. If a parent is being abusive to a child, it's abusive, whether it's using the wrong name or not. I'm saying if you believe this is, I mean, I'll just use my own. If my daughter decided she was going to be a boy, I would be so kind and so compassionate and loving. I'm not going to be berating her, bullying her.
Right.
But I'm not going to start calling her Charlotte. Her name is Charlotte, and I'm going to keep doing that in as kind a way as I can. Should I go to jail for that?
I don't think you should go to jail for that.
Do you think I should get a ticket?
I don't think you should get a ticket for it.
Okay.
But every study that we've done shows that like respecting a trans person's chosen gender identity is like one of the best things that you can do for them in terms of like their mental health and their sense of self. And that
we'll have to punt that conversation too, because I actually don't know that I agree with that. But
would you want to act in a way that like is intentionally distressing towards your child?
No, well, I would probably try to, and this is, I think, what we've talked about before. I tried to actually just avoid using pronouns if there's a question on them, or using the name if there's a question. So, like if you told me today that you didn't go by Josh anymore, then every time I talk to you, I would just be like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" I would just try to not use your name at all, because I don't want to try to be a brat about it.
That's fair. Yeah.
But I also don't think that there should be rules.
I actually used to go by Carson in high
really?
school. Yeah. And
Carson.
This has been a big thing with like a lot of my friends from high school.
Well, I don't want to dead name you. Well, the thought experiment I was going to ask, you don't apply now because I know where you stand on this is different. But to Evan, the question would be, if we lived in a state that had this kind of law, would you try to skirt around it, or would you kind of just be like, screw it, I'm going to say what I want to say and go to jail?
Well, I think if you look at, say, civil rights, civil disobedience, there has to be a mass of people who say, no, I'm going to say what I want to say, and you can't put us all in jail. I think you have to do that. So would I be courageous enough to be one of those people? I don't know. I'd like to think so, but You have to civil disobedience is showing the injustice of a law by letting it carry through to its full conclusion, right?
Which means jailing people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which means, so we're all going to go sit at the diner and we're all going to go to jail, and that will show the injustice of what is taking place, because no one, when they see people going to jail for eating at a restaurant, will think that's just. So.
Sure. I will say, when I the thing that started to turn so I used to be of the mind, even though I am conservative when it comes to sexuality and gender, I very much was using people's preferred pronouns because I just thought that was the kind and Christian thing to do, to create space where we can have further conversation. I still very much hear that argument, but the thing that started to change my mind on it was hearing people talk about what does God say about a person, and what God says about the person is the truth about that person. So God says that you're made in his image and that you're loved, you're worthy of salvation, all these things. So those things are true because God says them about you. And if God says that you are a man, then I want to be a truth teller, and not only to the other people, but to the person that made you and made me and is truth. And so I've started trying to really avoid it at all costs so that I'm not actually saying a lie, because I want to be a truth teller. And so that would be my sort of applied theology here, is that I don't know that I would try to go to jail, or I wouldn't get a bunch of people together to try to prove a point, but I definitely would not shy away from speaking truth, because in the end, I have an audience of one. It's not Colorado law or Texas law. It's the Lord.
Yeah. And I agree with that. I just think that, like, God made you as a trans man or a trans woman, right?
Okay, well, it's not looking stormy
Not you.
outside, so
Not you.
I'm just worried about the
not you
heresy light
personally,
now.
right? But, like, you know what I'm
I
saying.
know you meant.
But I don't know. Is this the part where we kind of introduce the white pill
Sure, give me a white pill.
of this?
Yeah. They're hard to find in this.
Well, that was mine. Speak the truth.
Yeah.
Say the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that for me, my white pill in all of this would be the hope that, like, whoever, wherever you come down on this disagreement, I hope that we can begin to treat each other in ways that are loving and respectful, such that, like, we won't need these kinds of laws anymore, right? Because, like, at the end of the day, I don't think,
I agree with you on
we
that.
would all agree, I hope, that, like, there's no reason to
Not going to happen. Sorry, let's just cut to the chase.
Okay,
That's
fair
the
enough.
black
fair
pill.
enough. Okay,
because
fair enough.
because you're
I'll
gonna
find
have
another white pill. There's one in here somewhere.
Well, you're gonna have a Jeff Younger situation whose wife essentially kidnapped his children, took them off to California, where they are protected by a bill even stronger than what Colorado just signed, and he has no access to his children. He's totally cut off from his children, and she's transing one of their kids without his permission. So,
I think that kid was probably already trans to begin with, but
yeah, that's debatable.
I guess my hope is that
yes,
for
we should all be nice, but if I believe a boy is a boy, axiomatically, being nice doesn't solve this issue.
Sure.
Well, you didn't say
I just
be
believe
nice,
that
actually.
being trans is part of the beauty and the dignity in the way that God created that person, and I just hope that one day everybody is able to see that and recognize it and celebrate the full spectrum of God's creation.
You said in your white pill, and I would like to close here, something that I think we can all agree with, but we would do it very differently. You said, I think we should all love and respect people. I agree. I think we could all agree we should love and respect everybody, trans people, non-trans people. The way we love them is going to look different, because I think loving someone is saying the truth. And you would say that loving someone in this situation is recognizing that is the truth and respecting their pronouns. And we're going to have to leave it at that. Because
I know.
That's the last word.
This-
Where can people find you, Josh?
Oh man.
if you want them to.
Somewhere in Dallas. Follow me.
Are you online?
At the Real Crawdad on Instagram. I don't really do anything else. I don't really have a social media presence. Trying to work on that. But yeah, if you want to occasionally hear more hot takes like this on my story, follow me at the Real Crawdad. That's real spelled REEL.
Oh, like a movie reel.
Yeah,
The Real Crawdad.
Yeah,
Okay.
the REAL was already taken. So
Okay.
that's why.
That's awesome. And I would love to get you back at one of our events, because you do have hot takes on everything. So not to make you our token woke person, but
I'm used to it, man. Let's do it.
it's fun. You can find me and information about Evan on our website, theologybythepint.org. We have a leadership page. You can read up about us and even message us. But also, we're at upcoming events. The next event is June 10th. It's going to be different from all the other events we've ever had, something kind of special. We're doing it here in the sanctuary of First Lutheran, because we're going to be talking about worship. Does it matter how you worship? Does God care about the kind of worship? And then we're actually going to worship in 2 different ways. High church, low church, and we're all going to sing Kumbaya at the end with a fog machine. I'm kidding. Maybe. I don't know. Come and find out.
And I'm Evan. I am at First Lutheran, flhouston.org. Thanks for watching. Until next time, we encourage you to question freely, think deeply, and disagree as needed.